Thank you very much. Yes, good morning. I'm looking. I can only see Louis, Louis or Lewis in the room at the moment. But I will, as it has now turned 9 o'clock, I will crack on. So good morning. Yes, my name is Keith Hurst. A pleasure to be here this morning. I will be running through the feedback from this summer's International GCSE Commerce examination, feedback on the examination series. So I hope this session is useful for you. I'm going to go over papers, the main highlights, some of the main takeaways from both papers. The session is not intended to go through every question. It is a focus on those questions that were perhaps most interesting from a marking and interpretation perspective, and those questions that were less well answered by candidates also. So what we will do, I mean, I think I'm talking to Louis at the minute. There will be opportunities for questions at the end, Louis, if there are any of that we can put into the chat. So we're going to get into some detail of the questions. The aims of the session is to receive that feedback on this summer series to guide teachers and candidates for 2025 and to be helpful in that regard. I will highlight some resources at the end of the session that will be useful. You might already be aware of, but I'll highlight the support pages and the resource pages that are available. I don't know, but I would certainly flag at this stage that the examiner's report is a really, really useful resource to be reading cover to cover. It highlights performance for different questions. What were the things that candidates were doing well? What were they doing less well? And it's a really good resource. So can I get in then to the overview of the paper? And here are some of the headlines from this summer. The principal examiner and the chief examiner found and report that both paper 1 and 2 were accessible this year for candidates. A large majority seemed to finish the paper. Lots of really good responses, actually. It is clear in the development of the course that there's a good deal of commercial understanding from studying the course. So that's really good to see. I want to point out that questions can come from any part of the specification. I'll cover what is covered on paper 1, what is covered on paper 2, but questions can be taken from any aspect of the specification, and it's important that centres don't feel that there are some questions that are, I guess, off limits. I think that's the point there. In terms of grade boundaries, there's similar performance to 2023. Actually, certainly in some questions, the boundaries very close. The 9 boundary. So there was a performance that was similar to 2023. At the bottom end, performance was actually better this year, and it led to grade boundaries being higher, which is a positive reflection in terms of how candidates have found the paper. I'm going to come on later to talk about, well, I'm going to, throughout the session, explore different question types and look at what are the approaches to those different question types. I will get on to eventually levels-based questions, and it's important to, I think, remind any delegates today that those level-based responses are used as discriminators. They're not intended that every candidate will get full marks on a 6-mark question and so on. They are very much intended as discriminators, and I will come on to those a little later. Okay, so it's now working. Can we get into the paper proper then? So as I say, the intention is not to go through every question. We've got 1 hour. I want this to be as purposeful and as useful for you as possible. I hope that the presentation in itself will be useful for delegates with their students. That's the intention of this. So there should be some of this presentation that you can go away and use directly with students or with other members of the department. Okay, we're on paper 1. We're on question 1E part 2. It's the first state question of the paper. Paper 1 is commercial operations and associated risks, and it is drawn from themes 1 and 2 of the specification. So that's where we're sitting at the minute. So first state question. I think one of the main things I want to make clear today is the fact that this is a 1-mark question. I don't want us to feel that, I don't want teachers to feel, I don't want students to feel that it is an easy mark. It's a giveaway mark. And if you look at the 3rd bullet point on screen, only 20% answered this question correctly, despite it being a 1-mark question. The question that I'm talking about is the one that is circled. And the key to remember for state questions is that they must be contextualized. So this question, state 1 possible disadvantage for Mitko Yuan of reducing the price of the set meal after 9 o'clock. It is not enough to simply put cheap price. That the answer must be in context, in the context of this particular scenario. So the example could relate to food, it could relate to Thai food, it could relate to ingredients. The bottom bullet point gives a little example here. A contextualized example needs to be provided. For example, the lower price might not be enough to cover the costs of the ingredients such as rice. So it is that context. There are other examples provided in the mark scheme also. So it is that level of context that is needed on a state question. And I think that number on the screen speaks for itself, with 20% answering correctly, 80% incorrectly. The reason, let me tell you, is it was virtually entirely due to an uncontextualized response. Hopefully that is something that can be really easily put right with your candidates. And here it is again in terms of the mark schemes in there. Can I draw delegates' attention to the mark schemes, which do provide those contextualized responses? So to the right of the screen, the mark scheme, you can see 2 examples provided there that attract the 1 mark, and you can see that they are both in context. So the first one, this could reduce the waste of food ingredients that has not been used in set meals sold before 2100. Second example, the price reduction of 12.5% could encourage more customers to buy Thai food at Mitko Yuan. So that is really, really key, and one of the big takeaways from today. So first state question, a contextualized response required, and important for that reason. Okay, moving on. Paper 1, question 1F. This is the first explain question of the paper. Explain one reason why stalls in street markets are popular. It's worth 3 marks. A real mix in terms of the mark allocations for this one. I mean, I've put on the screen the example that 10% or so didn't score anything on this one. Now, the intention was that this was an accessible question, that this was something that candidates, it's fairly early in the paper, candidates can pick up marks for this. I mean, another figure, I could have put it on screen there actually, was that well under 50% got 3 marks on this paper. So again, the reason for that comes down to technique. First thing to bear in mind, there is only one reason required. It was found that there were candidates putting multiple reasons and not developing those reasons adequately enough. So one reason why stalls in street markets are popular, it's got to be one reason that is then developed. On screen, you can see bullet point 4, terms and phrases such as therefore or as a result of can help your students, your candidates, build those developed responses. So on screen, left-hand side, I've put an example there. There is an example there for you. Street markets serve specific local areas. Reason, 1 mark. That's what the 1 mark is there after. Therefore, stall holders get to know the needs and wants of their local customers, 1 mark. And as a result, can supply them with the products that they need. A really clearly developed chain of reasoning there. To the right of the screen underneath, there is the mark scheme there. Again, I will give another mention to the mark schemes that provide some really, really good examples for you to use with your candidates, with your classes. So it doesn't, it's not a massive leap, is it, to create responses like there are there, put them on screen as a little do it now task, a little starter activity. So the bottom one, stalls in street markets often sell products cheaper than restaurants, 1 mark, as they have, there's the linking point, lower overheads, 1 mark, and can therefore sell at lower prices than shops. So really clear linked strands of development to pick up the 3 marks. Hopefully that makes some reason. Just to repeat, a number of candidates were providing multiple reasons. And once they start doing that, they're drifting from the point of the question. Again, any questions on that, there'll be opportunities later in the session. Okay, question 1H, of course, still on paper 1. Now, this is the first question that is marked using levels, our level descriptors. Come on to those in a little while. The question, this is a question in context. So Siri Homes Pvt Limited is a construction business in Sri Lanka. It builds residential apartments, factories and warehouses. It sets high quality construction standards and prides itself on the safety measures it has in place. Okay, here's the context. Really, really, really important that candidates read that context and don't just dive into the question. We were seeing some evidence of candidates not using the context, not getting their response into the right context. So I'm going to talk about the level descriptor shortly. This is AO2 and AO3, application and analysis. Candidates must relate their response to the scenario. So a builder, basically, a construction business. Again, a lot of candidates weren't picking up level 3 responses here. Can I go through this bullet point 4, the contextualized response that you might use? Examples need to be provided that are in context. So, for example, any employee injured while working on a building site could claim compensation from PVT. The question, remember, is analyze the benefit of South Sea Airways PVT Limited of having employer's liability insurance. And we can see that response that I've just read there is very clearly related to that particular business and that industry. An employee injured while on a building site. You could take it a stage further, couldn't you? The employee, rather than using the word employee, it could be a bricklayer, a joiner, an electrician, so that candidates are really making sure of those marks for context, those AO2 application marks. Level mark schemes use what we call a best fit approach, and I'm going to illustrate that to you now. So here is the descriptor for that particular question. That question is assessing AO2 application and AO3 analysis. How this works then is that candidates are placed in a level for each assessment objective. So let me illustrate. Second bullet point, AO2 is the application of knowledge. Let us assume that a response, the examiner is marking a response and thinks, do you know what, there's really, really good AO2. This is really, really well applied to the building construction industry. It's for that first bullet point in the descriptor, detailed application of knowledge, understanding, commercial concepts. It's really good. It's really, really well contextualized. And then they read on, and the analysis, the AO3, is actually less good. It might be a series of points that are unrelated. Then it's not the linked strands of development. It is more piecemeal. The examiner feels that the response is for AO3 placed in level 1. So the circles on screen are where the candidate sits. The best fit approach means that the examiner will place that response in level 2, actually. It's between the two. It's not a fully level 3 response. It's not a fully level 1 response. It's somewhere in between. So the candidate that gets 2 level 3 responses for AO2 and AO3 would be in level 3, and the examiner would decide whether that is 5 marks or 6. And that's the judgment of the examiner. And that's how our level descriptors work and the best fit approach. Again, any questions on this, please ask them later. So, still with paper 1, now on question 2E, and a question that wasn't answered well. Explain why a customer could make a complaint about goods purchased from a shop. Now, the thinking was that this would be a well answered response. In fact, it wasn't. Now, remember, explain questions don't need context. So this is not like the state question that we saw earlier. This is not like the analyze question we've just looked at. Explain questions are all about those chains of reasoning. So there's only one way required here. One way a customer could make a complaint. Again, terms such as therefore and which will mean will be useful here. So bottom left of the page, go back to the shop where the goods were purchased, which will mean they can speak to the manager or the person in charge about the problem and therefore ask what action can be taken. So that is what the candidate is doing to develop that response. Can I also draw your attention to the responses on the mark scheme at the right-hand side of the page? Again, hopefully useful for your candidates. Use those. Get students seeing how they can see these chains of reasoning being developed. Another explain question that wasn't brilliantly answered was 2F. Explain the importance of the principles of insurable interest when taking out insurance. Again, not almost 50% of candidates scored 0 marks on this one. It is clearly an area of the specification to revise, to revisit, to make sure that your candidates are aware of. What I said at the start about remember that all aspects of the specification can be covered. This we think is one example of an area that centres have perhaps thought, oh, that there can't be a question on insurable interest. It's in section 2.1.2. It certainly can be, and it was poorly answered. Can we have a look at the mark scheme to the right-hand side of the page? So the principle states that you cannot insure something that does not belong to you or that you don't have an interest in. An example of this would be if you insured a car you did not own, therefore you would not suffer financially if it was lost. Okay, so that reminder, parts of the specification, to make sure all of the specification is covered. Okay, so come on to a calculate question. Calculate question. So this was followed, the questions there for you and the stimulus about Nintendo. And the question, calculate the price of the Nintendo Switch controller after the discount of 7.5%. And you are advised to show your workings. Can I really make a plea that candidates do show their workings? There are marks to be picked up from showing workings, and it's an advisable strategy for candidates to do that. So 2 marks awarded for the correct answer. What I will say though is that if nothing other than the correct answer appears on the line, that both marks are awarded. So in this case, 64.74, if that was placed on the line, candidates don't have to worry about the units and what denomination they're using. That is always provided. If the right answer is on that line, irrespective of the workings, the examiner will award 2 marks and move on. It is only when the incorrect answer is on that line that the examiner will look at the working. And this is why we think it is advisable for candidates to show their working, because if they've made some sort of error in the calculation and the answer that they have put on there is wrong, then the examiner will go searching for a mark for workings, and on the mark scheme to the left of the screen there you can see where possible marks might have been awarded for those workings. I hope that makes sense. I hope that is the strategy you're using there. But yes, certainly for the advice that we would offer is for candidates to show their working. Number of calculate questions throughout the paper, of course. Exactly same approach applies. Okay, paper 2, first question is question 1C. It is a defined question. Context is not required. Not a well-answered question, actually. Again, and was this somewhere on the specification where centres, teachers, candidates perhaps didn't feel that this was a question that would be answered? It requires some secure knowledge of what an investor is. This is from section 3.2.3 of the specification. So for your reference there. And as I've said, despite being worth only 1 mark, it was poorly answered. The mark scheme is on screen there, and you will see the definition: a person or an organization that puts money into a business in the hope of profit. And there were many variants of that, and many not securing the single mark. Okay. Question 1E1 and 1E2. By the way, Louis, I'm looking at the participants list, and it looks like there is still only you and I in this meeting. So I hope there's an opportunity when at the end, if you do have any questions, we can. I hope you're jotting any down, and we can deal with those. The room is yours, actually. So, okay, paper 2, 1E, 1E1 and 1E2. First state question on paper 2, where candidates had to identify a benefit to TVG of offering hire purchase to its customers. Almost half did this, but I'm more interested in the fact that slightly more than half of all candidates did not get this mark. And that is something we started by looking at the grade boundaries, and I think we can see that every mark is valuable. If there are 1 mark questions up for grabs, single marks, then as teachers we want to make sure that our students are harvesting these marks, actually. So state 1 reason. I've put a response on screen there in blue to the left hand side. If a buyer does not pay the installments for an Audi car on time, TVG has a legal document that they can show in court. So the context is coming from the Audi car. Is that okay? Do we see that? I'm also now looking at the mark scheme to the right hand side, and we can see 2 responses there. Again, great responses to use with candidates. If a buyer does not pay the installments for an Audi car, if that candidate had put product in there rather than Audi car, they would not have got the mark. It is the reference to the car and the Audi car that contextualizes the response and secures the mark. The second example on the mark scheme, TVG will know the customer is more likely to understand the terms and conditions of the 12 to 60 month hire purchase agreement. There's from the context. That's the hire purchase period we're talking about. There's the context. Look at the mark scheme also right at the bottom. NB, do not accept a reason that is not in the context of TGV. So seems simple, but lots were not getting the mark there. Lots were not getting the mark. Again, another defined question. And another defined question poorly answered. 60% of candidates did not get this mark. Had they covered this in class? Had this been covered? We can only postulate. But if 60% are getting a 1 mark definition question wrong, one suspects not. So it's taken from 4.5.1 of the specification. What I hope we're picking up here is the importance of candidates understanding their key terms. the key terms, the knowledge. Commerce comes with a vast bank of terminology, of language that candidates are learning. And whilst we think that their knowledge of commercial aspects is really, really strong, some keywords are not. So let's look at the mark scheme. The mark scheme gives an example that I can't improve on: a document sent by a supplier to a customer advising that goods ordered have been dispatched. Remember, there's no context required in a defined question. Look at the question. It's not referring to a business at all. It is AO1 knowledge. Define the term advice note. Okay. We come to our first justify question. Justify questions always worth 9 marks. It's about Tesco, a leading UK supermarket. Here's a blurb. Please, candidates must read the stimulus material very, very closely. That must be gone through, must be understood. Do not, remind them, don't dive in to the question. Let's, oops, let me. So the question was, I'm looking at the bottom, at the left-hand side of the page of the extract from the paper. Tesco must ensure its supermarkets are always stocked to satisfy customers and protect profits. It is reviewing its transport of seasonal and perishable foods to its UK distribution warehouses. It is considering the following 2 options. Option 1, use more trains to deliver perishable foods, or option 2, buy more trucks to deliver perishable foods. And the question, justify which one of these 2 options Tesco should choose. Important thing to bear in mind, the structure of the justify question is always the same. It's assessing AO2 application, AO3 analysis, and AO4 evaluation. Third bullet point down, candidates must make a choice on whether Tesco should use trains or trucks. And can you really impress upon students that 4th bullet point, there is no correct answer here. There is no correct answer to this response. And once again, the mark scheme, the level descriptor, is the best fit approach will be used. There are no marks for knowledge on this one. Candidates have to choose whether Tesco should choose trains or trucks. Most candidates go along the line of justifying which one they have chosen. Now, for evaluation, the best approach to evaluation is to consider why the method they have chosen might not be effective. What are the problems? So if the candidate that talks about trains and what are the strengths of trains, the best approach, well, not the best approach, an approach for evaluation is to consider, right, what are the problems with trains? And you think, don't you, about the fact that train stations might not be located as close to distribution centres as the road network, and to offer balance in that way before arriving at a conclusion. Candidates don't need to consider both. Really important. They don't need to consider both options to access level 3 and full marks. The best fit approach will be used. Another approach to evaluation could be to sort of say, look, the reason why I think trains is more important, is better than trucks. That is an approach. What I will say is that application needs to be throughout. This really needs to be if the candidate's using 3 paragraphs, they need application, reference to the case study in all paragraphs. Question 3D. So once again, we have calculate question times 2 this time, and the top right hand of the screen, there's a lot going on this screen, isn't there? Complete the quotation below to show the missing amounts. We've got on screen that only 33, a third of candidates picked up both marks here. A third of far more did got the mark on part 1. So the 42 for part 1. Most candidates did secure that. What was found for part 2 was that candidates often deducted the VAT rather than adding it on, and it really cost them. Can I point out what I've put on the 4th bullet point there as well, is that Appendix 6 and 7 of the specification provides a lot more information on the quantitative skills in this qualification and formulae that candidates need to know. It's a really, really useful resource actually, and that's contained in Appendix 6 and Appendix 7. Okay, the final question to go through before we get on to support and any questions. So the question that was flagged by the principal examiner was question 4B on paper 2. Analyze how TLG uses digital technology to promote its new products. So an analyze question. It's worth 6 marks. It is assessing AO2 and AO3, so application and analysis. Once again, you've seen in the question is referring to TLG. It must relate, this response must be contextualized to that particular business. Only 50% of candidates scored above level 2. Lots of candidates were in level 1 for this. So the exemplar response there, a contextualized example needs to be provided. For example, TLG has created a new website to communicate with fans of Lego about new designs for its construction toys. These are deliberately in red to flag those. The website attracts users who may then become more aware of other TLG products. I mean, mentioning TLG in itself is not an example of context, but just to show you there, referencing toys and Lego, really, really important. And a route into, definitely a route into context. The approach, once again, is levels descriptor and the best fit approach. Lots of candidates did not contextualize their answer to this. So, and we thought there was lots of opportunity to do that. So there was lots of potential application available in the STEM and reference to the new website, the collection of votes and the interactive nature of the communication. Many candidates realized that this was an approach. A reminder that higher marks are achieved with the use of interconnected point, that linked chain of analysis. This leads to as a result of that, and that's key really. So that was the last question to flag in terms of where candidates have underperformed and where there are key messages for centres to take away. Okay, I want to talk a little bit about the support available. When I say many of you will know, Louis, it's still just you and I. So Colin Leith is the subject advisor for business and related subjects. Colin is an absolute font of knowledge, really useful. If you email or call Colin, you'll get straight through to him. He will. He's really knowledgeable and a great great source of information and support actually, and it's a real strength of the course. I'm gonna show you what you've got on screen. There is the web page with all those links through to the resources that are available. I've put on the next one. There is a link in the top. You can see that it's hyperlinked. That's a link directly when you get this presentation, a link straight through to all of these resources and pages and everything you need. So IGCSE Commerce has its own dedicated website and resources and resource links, and that's a great point of contact. From look down the left hand side here, specification, exam materials, teaching and learning materials, all readily there. I really hope, Louis, that you're making use of Exam Wizard. Great tool to create exam use. So it's basically an interactive tool that can access the entire back catalogue of exam papers and allow you to create little topic tests on certain topics. It's absolutely free. You can pull in the mark schemes as well for accurate marking. You can pull in the examiner's report. The most recent exam content is there. So a really powerful resource, actually, Exam Wizard, and something that we're really proud of, and a really great resource. Again, the link is on this page to the portal that has got all of these apps on there, from Results Plus, and those examiners reports are hopefully really useful. Exam Wizard, all there, one-stop shop. Click through. They're readily available for you. Similarly with Results Plus Analysis, any breakdown of questions and what questions have worked well, what have performed less well, and so on. Now, any questions? We come on to the point now. Claire and Nash, because there's only Louis in the room, and I don't know whether Louis, we can certainly open the chat and I can answer any questions on chat. Is that okay? By the same token, I'm happy to open the microphone if there's any questions that you have, Louis, following that. So Claire and Nash, what do you advise?
Okay, sorry. I will open the chat.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, the chat is already available.
Okay. So Louis, I've just typed a question there just to make sure you can access chat to see if you have any questions from today. Certainly. Nash and Claire, is it okay to open the microphone?
Okay. Let me. Okay. Louis can open his mic.
Hello.
Louis, yeah, good morning. Yeah.
Morning. How are you?
Yeah, really well, thank you. Yeah, I mean, given that there's a few of us in here, it probably makes sense to use a microphone rather than the chat. So, yeah, I'm more than happy to go through the best fit approach again. Louis, where are you based, by the way? Where's your school?
Currently in Marbella in Spain.
Okay,
First,
okay.
first. I've only been here for a few months, so
Oh, so
definitely want to.
this term then, yeah. So just started
Yeah,
this.
just
Yeah,
started.
right, yeah. How's that going? Hope that's going well.
Yeah. It's settling in.
You've got
New place,
excellent,
brand new to
brilliant.
Spain. So yeah, big learning curve.
Marbella. I'll try not to be too jealous about that, Louis. That's
Thanks.
okay. So, Louis? Can I ask? Are you new to Pearson in terms of qualifications? Have you taught any of the business suite at all before? That will help in me answering your question about the level descriptors. That's all.
So actually, I'm originally a maths teacher,
Okay.
and this is my first year teaching anything sort of humanities based. We were
Okay.
Pearson for
Sure.
maths. So that's
Okay.
why I suppose like, the biggest challenge for me has been like, the exam questions and like
Yeah. Sure.
sorry the essay questions and like assigning
Sure.
those levels because that's completely foreign for me. And
Yeah, and do you know what? There's an Ask the Expert service as well, and I would imagine. Have you got a network of schools or anyone else that you can talk to about this or not?
yeah, I do. Yeah.
Okay, that's good because it can be a lonely place when you are sort of. And do you know what? What I would really major on would be that context in terms of. So making sure that responses are contextualized throughout is really key in actual fact. So whether it is a Pearson business qualification or economics or commerce, the same approach is used around level descriptors. I mean, it should be the same anywhere really, because this is how levels work. So um, in fact, I'll be honest with you, Louis, the example I gave was a more common example is for a response that has really good level of analysis, chains of reasoning. So in this response that's on screen now, so do you know what? There's a well-developed response that is, let's have a look at this question. So analyze the benefits at Sauceria Homes of having employers' liability insurance. A more common approach here would be for a candidate to talk very generally about employers' insurance. Do you know, without it being contextualized?
Yeah, and I think my experience as
Therefore,
well, there's a lot of like spray and pray tactic. Just get
yeah,
everything down that they
get
know
everything
about that
down.
topic.
Okay, so let's have a look. So that's how this works, and this is how your examiners will mark that. So do you know what? They've identified the chains of reasoning, the candidates using things like as a result of this leads to, and the examiner has placed that in level 3 because look at the descriptor for level 3, AO3. So the very bottom bullet point on those descriptors deconstructs commercial information and/or issues, finding detailed interconnected points with logical chains of reasoning. So look at the contextualized example there. Any employee injured while working on a building site. So they're the chains of reasoning. However, what is often missing is that context. It's not applied to that particular business scenario. So if the candidate did that really well and got those chains of reasoning and did all of that, but the response had very little context. In fact, the examiner felt that the context, look at that first bullet point in level 1 for AO2, there's limited application of knowledge and understanding of commercial concepts and issued to the it's not referencing this Sauceri Limited, it's not talking about building sites, it's a general response The examiner might go for level 1, and then we're left with a best fit scenario. And in that particular case, well, I'll tell you now, the examiner would be placing that response in level 2. What I can't tell you now is whether the examiner would go automatically for 3 marks or 4 marks. But what I can tell you is that that would be a best fit level 2 response, and that's how that works. Does that make sense? Now, Claire and Nash, I don't know whether we've lost.
Hi, Keith. Actually, Louis left a message in the chat. He says his mic has gone off.
Okay. Okay. So I think on that basis, then yeah, Louis, if your mic's if you can hear me, if that's answered your question, I mean, if there are more questions, I mean, I can deal with them on the chat now. I've got another 5 minutes or so, but there is that support portal. There's Colin Leith that I flagged up on there. There's an Ask the Expert service as well, that to the point where, you know, if you had a response from a student that you wanted a senior examiner in this qualification to look at, that service will allow you to do that. So plenty of support available. I'm pleased you've found today's session useful. And I'm conscious that Louis might have gone now. He might have lost contact altogether in Marbella. So great stuff. Thank you, Louis. Thank